As far as diagnosis is concerned, standard methods of physical examination, a 6-minute walking time, not for diagnosing but for evaluating the disability of the pulmonary hypertension, and then pulmonary function test, ECG. These days we are seeing more complex types of pulmonary hypertensions even in elderly people and with comorbid conditions. And one of the problems is that most of these patients, by the time they come to you, they are in class 3. So they are really in the final stages of the disease. So if you have lung disease, the echo is even less reliable in terms of diagnosing an idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. And therefore, right heart catheterization still remains most important. The AMBITION trial, I think, was a major sort of trial breakthrough in the thought process of treatment, and that was the combination of ambrisentan and tadalafil in patients with pulmonary hypertension. I'm going to talk on idiopathic pulmonary hypertension in women. Just like to mention that the treatment, diagnosis and management doesn't differ between men and women, but the fact remains that women are much more prone to getting idiopathic pulmonary hypertension as compared to men. It's basically a rare disease, though we see it off and on in our clinics. And amongst the various forms of pulmonary hypertension, idiopathic pulmonary hypertension is the most common form, except if you exclude the left heart disease, because if you look at all forms of pulmonary hypertension, left heart disease resulting in pulmonary hypertension is the most common form. The idiopathic hypertension is much more common in women, usually at a young age of 20 to 40. And these days we are seeing more complex types of pulmonary hypertensions even in elderly people and with comorbid conditions. And one of the problems is that most of these patients, by the time they come to you, they are in class 3. So they are really in the final stages of the disease. The cellular changes happen in pulmonary hypertension. First, there's an endothelial dysfunction, there's a vascular remodeling, intimal fibrosis, and eventually in situ thrombosis, resulting in poor prognosis of these patients. As far as diagnosis is concerned, standard methods of physical examination, a 6-minute walking time, not for diagnosing but for evaluating the disability of the pulmonary hypertension, and then pulmonary function test, ECG. But I think the most important investigation and the simplest investigation remains the echocardiography for a basic primary diagnosis of pulmonary hypertension. But though the echocardiography is most commonly used for diagnosing pulmonary hypertension, it's not as accurate as a right heart catheterization. If you look at meta-analysis of multiple studies, you'll see that the sensitivity is about 85% and a specificity about 74%. And this becomes even lower if the patient has got a lung disease. So if you have lung disease, the echo is even less reliable in terms of diagnosing an idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. And therefore, right heart catheterization still remains most important. Now, unfortunately, most of us who used to do lots of right heart catheterization in the past have simply stopped doing right heart catheterization for some reason or the other, so that many times we misdiagnose of pulmonary hypertension, or we misdiagnose pulmonary hypertension as idiopathic pulmonary hypertension when actually it is, say, for example, heart failure with preserved ejection fraction. So you have a patient who presents with pulmonary hypertension, which we often see on an echocardiography. We diagnose them as an idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, but actually they're diastolic heart failure, and you don't diagnose that. If you did a right heart catheter, you would find that increased capillary wedge pressure, and you'd easily differentiate that from an idiopathic pulmonary hypertension patient. I think most important, of course, I want to move on to treatment goals, and the treatment goal is, of course, to improve the quality of life, improve the patient's exercise capacity, to prevent clinical worsening, reduce hospitalization, and then, of course, select patients who do not respond and who would need lung transplantation. Now, when you see a patient with pulmonary hypertension, it's important for you to find out those patients who are vasoreactive. About 10% of, between 5 and 10% of patients are vasoreactive, and you cannot diagnose vasoreactive pulmonary hypertension unless you do a right heart catheter. So all these patients need to undergo right heart catheter with nitric oxide inhalation, and if you have a reduction of a mean pulmonary artery pressure of more than 10 millimeters, or a pulmonary artery pressure mean falls below 40 without a change in cardiac output, and that would be considered as a positive response, and these are the patients who need to be put on nifedipine and see the response to nifedipine. So you cannot start nifedipine unless you do a vasoreactive test. As I said, the chances of picking up vasoreactive about 5 or 10%. And since most of us don't do right heart catheterization except in PH clinics, etc., you may miss this whole group of vasoreactive pulmonary hypertension group. When you come to treatment of idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, there are three main groups of therapies. The endothelin pathway, which is bosentan, ambrisentan, and mesetentan. And fortunately, all three are available with us in our country. Then there's the nitric oxide pathway, the PD inhibitors, which is sildenafil, tadalafil, and riociguat. And again, all three are available with us and we can choose them. And then, of course, you have the prostacyclin pathway, which is the various prostacyclin, aloprost, selexipag, etc. And unfortunately, none of these prostacyclins are freely available in our country. So we just have two groups available. The third we can get with difficulty, and there are some patients in Kokilabén where we have a PH clinic where they are on prostacyclins, and mainly these are the patients who are congenital with pulmonary hypertension rather than adult idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. So our therapy predominantly relates to the endothelin pathway or the nitric oxide pathway. Now, if you look at the mode of action of sildenafil or tadalafil, you'll see that it predominantly acts at the conversion of cyclic GMP to GMP, and therefore increasing the levels of cyclic GMP. So that's how sildenafil and tadalafil acts. Riociguat, which has now recently been available with us, predominantly acts on the guanylyl cyclase stimulation, and therefore the mode of action is different compared to sildenafil tadalafil. So both, although they form in that same class of actions, their mode of actions is different. And we've just been discussing recently at the PH meeting that there are some patients who have been not so responsive to sildenafil and tadalafil, and when shifted to riociguat had better response. So I think it's something which we need to keep in mind, maybe not that is the first drug of choice, but certainly in patients who do not respond to sildenafil or tadalafil. Sildenafil is something which is most commonly used and was the earliest drug available to us. The problem is that it needs to be given multiple times a day and therefore has compliance issues. It also has vasodilatory side effects like epistaxis, headaches, flushing. It has occasionally been noticed to have loss of vision, loss of hearing, and it also has significant drug interactions. If you look at tadalafil, which has become much more common today as a drug of choice for treatment of idiopathic pulmonary hypertension, it has a much longer half-life and therefore has to be given just once a day in 20 or 40 milligram dosages. And there are multiple trials showing the benefit of tadalafil. So in my practice, usually I choose tadalafil over sildenafil as the first drug of choice for this group of drugs. Riociguat, I don't have any personal experience with. There have been a few patients at our hospital who have been on the drug. It has to be started in a dose of about 1 milligram and gradually increased. Again, it's a dose which requires to be given 3 times a day. It has shown increase in terms of 6-minute walking time, a reduction of pro-BNPs, improvement of functional heart classification. So it's another drug which we need to keep in mind and can be used particularly if tadalafil has not been effective in a group of patients. And of course, it is very commonly used as a treatment for CTPH, and I think that's one of the focuses of use of riociguat in treatment of pulmonary hypertension. So of course, CTPH is not really idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. When we move to the endothelin receptors, they block the endothelin receptor type A and type B. And by blocking these, they have effect in terms of reduction of pulmonary artery pressure, pulmonary vascular resistance, and mean right atrial pressure. The first one which was available was bosentan. The big problem was bosentan is it's hepatotoxic because of its inhibition of bile salt export pump. And therefore, the liver function abnormalities in studies were seen about 11% with bosentan compared to about 2% with the placebo. Again, it's to be given twice daily, and it also has a significant drug-drug interaction. So I think now with the availability of ambrisentan, which is one of the drugs which has much less effect on the bile salt and therefore less effect on the liver function test, it has a very high affinity for endothelin A, about 4,000 times more efficacy. It doesn't have too many drug-drug interactions and clinically can be given once a day in the dose of usually 5 or 10 milligrams. So most of the patients now have been shifted from bosentan to ambrisentan, which again, so the combination or the use of tadalafil and ambrisentan is probably a more rational use rather than use of bosentan or sildenafil, which I think can easily be replaced by these drugs. There are multiple studies with ambrisentan. It improves functional class. It has effect on survival. It improves 6-minute walking time, and is a pretty safe drug even over a long period of time of up to 2 years. Macitentan is now just recently be available, I think about a year or so now. It has a better potency and a receptor affinity towards binding specifically the ETA receptor, and it's again useful orally. It has a long half-life and can be used for a single once-a-day dose. Now, whether you use ambrisentan or macitentan, both are equally efficacious. There is no trials comparing one versus the other. Macitentan action is much longer because its active metabolic acts for a longer period of time. So it's certainly a longer acting drug. The Seraphin trial using macitentan 10 milligrams showed clearly an improvement in exercise capacity and in functional class. And it's also one of the only drugs to have shown a reduction in mortality and a reduction in hospitalization. So I think there are definite certain advantages of macitentan above ambrisentan as well. And again, if you look at this particular trial, which was in children and young adults with pulmonary hypertension, shifting them from bosentan to macitentan would increase the 6-minute walking time. So I think that if we were to choose between the three, it would be either ambrisentan or macitentan, depending on which one you wish to prefer, with some evidence to suggest that macitentan has an effect on morbidity and mortality. Macitentan has also been used in CTPH, just as riociguat has been used. The important aspect today is somewhat the same thought process as we have with hypertension. Should we start with one drug and then increase the dose and then add the second drug? Or should we use a combination of drugs and get the maximum effect as quickly as possible? And the recent data seems to suggest that when you combine drugs, it is more efficacious. The blood pressure, the pulmonary artery pressures reduce more, patient symptoms get controlled, and the patient quickly returns to a low-risk pulmonary hypertension rather than a high risk. There's a COMPASS trial which did a study with bosentan to sildenafil combination. It did not show any improvement in morbidity or mortality, but it did show improvement in 6-minute walking time and in reduction of NT-proBNP. And it was fairly safe to combine the two, so there was no additive side effects of combining sildenafil with bosentan. The AMBITION trial, I think, was a major sort of trial breakthrough in the thought process of treatment, and that was the combination of ambrisentan and tadalafil in patients with pulmonary hypertension. They used 10 milligrams of ambrisentan with 40 milligrams of tadalafil, or ambrisentan alone or tadalafil alone. So they combined each alone with the combination of two. And they looked at the various effects, and whether you looked at one alone or both alone or the pooled monotherapy versus the combination, there's a clear benefit in terms of combination therapy. So recent guidelines have suggested that you should not do one therapy, increase the dose, add the second one, but try and use a combination of optimal doses. Tadalafil has the advantage that it's long acting, so once a day. And ambrisentan again is once a day, so clearly it's a once a day drug can be given for benefit to these patients. There's also a very recent trial where there's a use of combination of tadalafil with macitentan as well, called the OPTIMA trial, and there is data in terms of improvement, 6-minute walking distance increase, there was a improvement in terms of functional capacity, and again there was no safety issues with combination. So you have now evidence of combination of both tadalafil and ambrisentan or with macitentan, and you can choose whichever you wish to choose of the two. As far as the prostacyclin group is concerned, you have epoprostenol, which is intravenous, then you have iloprost, which is inhalation, and then you have the other two, and selexipag is a more recent one which has been used, but unfortunately none of these are available in our country, so the experience is less. But these are drugs which are very useful. They're particularly useful in pediatric group of patients or in patients who don't respond or are getting into serious problems in spite of the drugs. If you look at the number of patients studied throughout the years, you see that the larger number of patients have been studied in the macitentan group and in the AMBITION, where there was a combination of groups. So earlier studies used to be very brief, but now we have studies which are of larger number of patients. So if you were to follow a treatment algorithm, you will see that the patient, you have to confirm pH by echocardiography. You need to do a right heart catheter for all these patients. If you seriously want to treat them properly, you have to find out if they're vasoreactive or not. If they're vasoreactive, put them on nifedipine. If they're not vasoreactive, then you treat them. Most of these patients, unless they're very mild pulmonary hypertension with minimal symptoms, should be on a dual drug combination, as I mentioned earlier. And if you look at the more recent guidelines of ECS, you can see that the combination of ambrisentan and tadalafil is class 1B for both patients in class 2, class 3 heart failure patients. Of course, class 4, most of them use prostacyclin group of drugs. The important thing to remember is that the quicker you get them from a high risk to a low risk, the longer the benefit to the patient. So you got to get them to functional class 1 to 2. You get the 6-minute walking time to more than 450, reduce the right atrial pressures to less than 8, improve their cardiac output to more than 2.5. And this can be achieved quickly only by a combination of therapy. So proper dose, preferably a single dose combination, would be the most preferential in getting these patients from a low risk into a small risk group. And of course, there are some surgical techniques like atrial septostomy, port shunt, and a couple of patients, pediatric patients at Kokilabhen underwent port shunts and are doing well. And there's also pulmonary artery denervation, like renal artery denervation. It has been found that pulmonary artery denervation can also reduce idiopathic pulmonary hypertension. So I feel that there is a vast amount of patients that need to be treated, and I think we're not treating our patients properly. I think most of us just put on sildenafil, don't do right heart catheters, don't use combination of drugs. And I think we're lucky that we got all these drugs available to us. I think we should be much more aggressive with our pH treatment than we are doing today. Thank you.
Insights from the world's best medical minds. You are watching therightdoctors.com.